y'all go to the supermarket to get your beef. I know I do. I'm standing on the Calston Ranch where they used to raise cattle for beef. Animals in the wild don't have supermarkets, so they have to hunt and gather food to eat. This week, I'm going over food webs and abiotic and biotic factors in an environment. Let's get into it. This week, we'll be going over food webs and food pyramids. Many different factors play a role in an ecosystem's ability to sustain life. Food webs show the connection between organisms and how they depend on each other. Here behind me, I have a food pyramid. All these are local organisms that you can find at Government Canyon State Natural Area. A food pyramid starts out with the sun. The sun provides solar energy for plants to make food. Plants, producers, are the first level of the food pyramid. They use the sun's energy along with carbon dioxide from the air and water to make energy. They're called producers because they're allowed to produce their own food. Just think about how important producers are. They provide much energy for the ecosystem and food pyramid and provide us with oxygen. So without plants, we wouldn't be able to breathe. The next layer above producers are primary consumers. These organisms cannot produce their own food, so they have to consume another organism to get energy. Primary consumers consume plants, so they're commonly referred to as herbivores. Some examples of primary consumers are fly, caterpillar, and butterfly, and there are also many more. And as you can tell, some other organisms on here can also be considered primary consumers, but we'll talk about that later. The next layer in the food pyramid are secondary consumers. Since secondary consumers eat other organisms, they're considered carnivores or omnivores. A carnivore is an organism that eats meat. An omnivore is an organism that can eat meat and plant matter. An example of a secondary consumer that's an omnivore is this mouse. This mouse doesn't only eat caterpillars or other insects, but also berries and fruits, like Texas persimmon. The fourth layer in a food pyramid are top consumers, otherwise known as tertiary consumers. An example of a carnivore is this red-shouldered hawk. This red-shouldered hawk would eat the spiny lizard, or the mouse, or the bird, making them a carnivore. But this coyote would eat any of these organisms along with some fruits, making it an omnivore. Not included in this food pyramid are decomposers. Decomposers' jobs are recycling dead matter through the food pyramid. Decomposers have the job of recycling matter throughout the pyramid, making a web. Examples of some decomposers are vultures. Now let's compare this to a food web. This may look like a big mess of lines and pictures, but this is actually a very important food web. Food webs show the interaction between predators and prey and how they're all connected and interact with each other. A food web shows how interactions in a community can affect all organisms. This is important to know because all organisms, including humans, depend on these interactions to survive. An example of an interaction in a community would be a producer like a sunflower is eaten by a primary consumer like a caterpillar, which is then eaten by a secondary consumer, a spiny lizard, which then can be eaten by other things, like a red-shouldered hawk or a common bird like this swallow. Organisms can be multiple types of consumers. Like I said earlier, either the red-shouldered hawk or this common swallow could eat the Texas spiny lizard. So if the common swallow ate the Texas spiny lizard, that would make this the tertiary. But if the swallow were to eat the caterpillar, that would make it the secondary. These interactions between other organisms are important to note because not only does it affect other organisms, but us as humans. A food web is different from a food pyramid because this shows the interactions and connections between organisms in a community, while a food pyramid shows the flow of energy in an ecosystem and how it's recycled by decomposers. All of these other organisms on the food web are considered biotic factors, which we'll go over later. Now let's dive into what other factors can play a role in an ecosystem. Organisms also rely on biotic and abiotic factors in their environment. An abiotic factor is anything that was not living. A biotic factor is anything that was living at one point or still is. These are important to an organism's life because they provide resources that they need. Let's look at some examples of biotic and abiotic factors. This tree is a perfect example of a biotic factor in an environment. This squirrel is seeking shelter from the hot summer day and laying on a branch. Now here's a video of that same squirrel munching on an acorn from the tree. This tree has provided shelter and food for this squirrel, making it a perfect biotic factor in an environment. If you look at the top of this cactus, you'll see green and purple fruit. These are called prickly pear, and this is a perfect source of food for animals in the wild. I'm at Government Canyon State Natural Area, where I'm currently standing in a spring. This is a perfect example of an abiotic factor in an environment. Well, what is an abiotic factor? An abiotic factor is anything that is not living or didn't come from something that was living at once. This spring provides habitat for many aquatic creatures and drinking water for much of the wildlife here. One way this abiotic factor plays a role in this environment is by allowing these ferns to grow. If we were to go up in elevation, you would notice that these ferns aren't present. That's because this spring provides enough moisture for them to grow. This abiotic factor allows these ferns to thrive because it provides the moisture. Having made your own bug net and participating in the pre-activity and going on a bug hunt, you may have noticed that some insects prefer different substrates over others. This is similar to how some birds have different survival strategies than others, which we talked about last week. Insects are primary consumers for the most part. Since there are so many of them and they are so small, it makes them easy prey. Here are some insects that can be found at Government Canyon State Natural Area and play an important role in the food web here. Alright everyone, thank you for tuning in for week 3. Be sure to join us next week where we talk about mammal adaptations for our last video. Thank you!